At 140 it feels no different to doing 70. It's absolutely incredible. It may be an acquired taste, but at the same time it represents a pinnacle of automotive technology which even today, in many respects, hasn't been surpassed. The car is a Citroen Maserati, produced from 1970 to 1975, and this particular model is a 1972 example with fuel injection. Citroen had started to produce hotter and hotter DS engines to try and produce faster and faster DSs, but at the same time recognised that they didn't have the expertise with engines to actually produce a super DS, which is what this effectively is. So they bought Maserati in 1968 and bought in their expertise with the intention of producing this as a Grand Routier, a Grand Tourer, in the style of the Bugattis and the Delages and the Delahaye's of the 1930s. Nobody really knows why the car's called the SM. Some people say it stands for Sa Majesté, which is French for Her Majesty. Other people think it stands for Special Maserati, but nobody knows. There were two key points behind the styling of the car. Firstly, they did want it to be stylish, to represent the future, if you like, almost as though it was designed for a future better than one we've inherited. The other area that they were interested in was the aerodynamics. It's quite a small engine, 2.7 litres, primarily for French tax reasons. Anything larger than that had massive sales tax, but they still wanted to achieve quite high performance, and so a very good aerodynamic body was very important to that. It's a teardrop shape, and in fact the floor of the car actually incorporates active aerodynamics, so that at speed it actually gradually sucks itself closer to the ground. The interior styling of the car, in some respects, is even more dramatic than the outside. You can imagine the interior being styled by Le Corbusier or Mies van der Rohe or one of the magnificent Bauhaus Art Deco architects. There are lots of references to their work, lots of areas where you can see their influence, the colours, the textures. Really minimalist, really advanced, really high quality, absolutely superb. In terms of features, it has the Citroen hydropneumatic suspension, which had already been seen on some of their other cars. But the more unusual items on it, it's got hydraulically steering and hydraulically self-levelling headlamps, rain-sensitive wipers, self-returning steering, so the steering goes back to centre when you take your hands off the wheel. It was almost space technology. It has a 2.7 litre V6. It's a 90-degree V6, which is very unusual to give it a wider angle for a lower bonnet line. It's got 4 overhead cams, chain-driven, producing 180 horsepower, which still manages to give the car a top speed of 150 miles an hour, 0 to 60 around about 8 seconds.
Citroen had been an innovator, and obviously the DS had been revolutionary in 1955, but they never produced anything very glamorous. The SM brochure is a prestige brochure with a glossy black cover. Inside this we get no technological pictures, no practical details. All the photographs are deeply shadowed, intriguingly lit shots of the car in exotic locations, and all the pictures show passengers in there, inevitably the man driving and a glamorous girl enjoying being a passenger.
We tested the Citroen SM about a year after it was first launched. Citroen were pretty careful about looking after the domestic market, so they didn't care too much about England, even though it is in fact 22 miles away, not that far.
We probably approached it with a bit of scepticism. First of all, because it was an immensely complex car, owed a lot to the Citroen DS saloon with the hydrogen pneumatic suspension, power steering, power brakes, but with the even greater complication of being powered by a Maserati V6 engine.
We used to refer to British cars as porridge, and in amongst porridge there was this extraordinarily coach-built, beautiful, low, long machine that had amazing loping performance.
This car had only 2 turns from lock to lock for its power-assisted steering, and Autocar reckoned it would take you about 50 miles to acclimatise, otherwise you'd just be turning the wheel too far and taking big chunks out of the corner.
This is actually a better classic car than it was a new car. It's a lovely emblem of its time. It's understood these days. All of the difficulties have been conquered by the people who love them.
It's an absolute magnificent confection of engineering, and I like the blend of French design and Italian mechanicals, and it looks utterly beautiful to this day.
At 100 miles an hour, it feels like a modern car. It's quiet, comfortable, fast. At 140, it feels no different to doing 70, and that's a mixture of the advanced aerodynamics, the technology of the mechanical side of it, the luxury of the interior. It's absolutely incredible. Part of the reason I still use it daily is because there hasn't been another car which has come along to better it. At the time, nobody really knew how to maintain them. So, for example, none of the dealers knew that the timing chain should be tensioned. So around about 44, the dealer network had no training at all. They just started selling the cars, and they had to learn as they went on. There were no manuals for it, and normally they learned through disaster. 54,000 miles, regular as clockwork, the engines would detonate and had to be replaced under warranty by Citroen. And not surprisingly, Citroen began to lose patience, and in 1984, were very proud to admit that they'd thrown away all of their spares. This car in 1970 would have sold for something in the region of £7,000. In comparison with its contemporaries, it was very slightly cheaper than an Aston Martin DBS, slightly more than a Ferrari Dino, slightly more than an Alfa Montreal. As far as the optional extras goes, the leather interior was slightly more than a Mini. In terms of owning it, it's better than I could have imagined. I frequently see people pointing and staring, and in particular, people do use the internationally recognised hand signal for "it's got steering headlights." Frequently see people doing that on the side of the road, explaining to other people what it is. The SM had a fairly formidable reputation, always did have, rightly so. It's a pretty scary car in terms of its technology, reliability. It's a real challenge. At the same time, when I bought it, I had a moment of clarity in my life where I decided that life was actually quite short, and I didn't want to have a life of compromise. I wanted to actually get on and do what I wanted to do without being frightened of doing it. So I just bought the car, and it hasn't disappointed me. It's wonderful.